So, this happened about 5 years ago in my home state at around 3 PM. It had been storming all day, so it was fairly dark and creepy out. I drove out of my neighbourhood and was only a few blocks away when I stopped at a four-way intersection with all four sides having a stop sign. As I waited for two vehicles to cross the intersection, I was glancing at my phone to make sure I wasn't running late. Something caught my eye as the two cars passed each other. To my left and right were light woods with neighbourhoods behind them. I could see something bright red in the forest to my left. I looked up at my phone just as a very unkempt lady came rushing out of the tree line and lost her footing and fell face first and hard onto the cement road. I was next to go through the intersection, but knew I needed to make sure this lady was okay. I got out of my car and the first thing I noticed was that she hadn't moved at all since hitting the concrete. And two, that she was only wearing a light nightgown, with no shoes or socks, even though it was freezing and stormy. I walked slowly up to her and was repeating, "Ma'am, are you okay? Ma'am?" Without moving any other body part than her neck, she scraped her face against the concrete to crane her neck and make eye contact with me. She looked... the best word I can think of is crazy. She looked completely insane. As we made eye contact, she started pushing herself up with her arms. I was saying, "Ma'am, maybe don't move, I'm gonna call 911. Just stay put till I get here. You might have really hurt your head on that fall. Do you need something? I have a blanket in my car." She's struggling to get to her feet as I'm repeating this to her. I pull on my phone to dial 911, and as I do, she somehow finds her footing and is standing about 9 feet from me just staring. By now another car had pulled up behind me and was asking if we were okay. I turned to the driver to explain what was going on, and as I do, I can hear footsteps on the pavement. I look back towards the old lady, and she's charging at me as fast as she can. I make a little yelp noise and try talking to her again to calm her down and tell her that I was here to help. Her eyes made it obvious she had no idea what I was saying, and she started grabbing at my hair and clothes and pulling me towards the woods, saying inaudible things. The man in the other car got out and got us disconnected, and I ran to my car and locked the door. She was trying to get past him and back to me, but he finally got her to sit down. I could hear sirens in the distance. I rolled my window down and handed the man a bottle of water and a blanket and told him the sirens were for the lady. I told him I was freaked out and had to leave. I drove slowly past the man and seated lady through the intersection, and in my rearview mirror I could still see her staring at my car as I drove away. This happened a year ago. I live in New Mexico, and sometimes I have to drive to Texas for business. I'd always enjoyed driving around the state. It's wide open spaces in between the pockets of civilization that dot the landscape. Right after the 4th of July holiday, I got a call to go to Texas on business. I made the drive a number of times before, and roughly 2 hours of it is through a very empty stretch of highway. It doesn't really have anything out there, beyond a tiny little town complete with post office, gas station, mum and pop store connected to it, a few trailers that look abandoned. It's one of those blink and you'll miss it places. I'd usually stop there for a coffee and a bathroom break whenever I had to make that particular drive, and this morning was no different. When I spotted the gas pumps and store in the distance, I pulled off the highway to their tiny gravel parking lot on the south side of the store. The layout of the place is the pumps are in the front, store behind them, and there's a small parking lot for customers on the south side, a dirt road running past the north side of the store, and a parking lot in the back that I'd glimpsed before when driving by that usually had a few cars, presumably belonging to whoever worked there. This is important to the story, bear with me. Anyways, I pulled into the parking lot on the south side, which was completely empty. I remember thinking this was a good thing, because usually the place was packed and I was in a bit of a hurry. For a moment I wondered if they were closed, but I'd been there on that same day of the week plenty of times, and the neon sign, "We're open," was lit up, so I got out of the car. My first clue something wasn't right was when I nearly tripped over a small stack of beer cans. The parking lot was in fact strewn with the type of trash one sees from parties: chip bags, food wrappers, disposable cups, and lots of beer cans. I thought that was strange, because every other time I'd been there the place was neat, clean to the point of near OCD even. But the pumps in the entrance to the store looked as shiny as ever, so I told myself it was probably just they'd had a 4th of July party there and no one had cleaned up yet. I started to walk towards the store, but about halfway there something made me stop and look around. I got a really strong sensation of being watched, but I didn't see anyone. In fact, I realized that was part of the problem. The whole place felt deserted and still. I didn't remember it being so dead any other time I'd been there, especially on a weekday morning. For a moment I wavered. Should I go ahead and go up to the door, just to check it out, or walk back to my car and forget the whole thing? I'm sort of paranoid anyways, and something about the whole thing just felt off. But then the lure of coffee, they had good coffee, and a bathroom made me push that uneasiness aside as I kept walking forwards. I was nearly to the door when I heard the unmistakable crunch of gravel under tyres coming from the north side of the store, just out of my line of sight. The noise startled me because it was so quiet that the sound might as well have been a gunshot going off. Dead silent 1 minute, then that sound the truck makes if you have to push it to start on the gravel road and it's rolling forward. I was pretty sure I heard footsteps briefly as well. The hair stood up on my arms and I decided I'd had it. I was noping out of there. I had maybe 5 feet left to get into my car when this big ass black pickup truck with 2 guys in it rolled out far enough beyond the wall where I could see them. Mind you, they weren't on the dirt road, which would have made sense, but right up against the side of the store itself. I saw them staring at the front door, then the one in the passenger seat caught sight of me and said something to the driver, pointing at me. They looked surprised, as if they'd been expecting me to be at the door or maybe inside by now. Something else to note, the north side of the building is much closer to the entrance of the store than the south end. When they saw me backing away, back to my vehicle, only then did they start up the engine to their truck. I waved, hoping they were friendly, but instead I got nothing but cold stares. Not friendly or hostile, just staring at me while the one in the passenger seat kept talking to the driver who wasn't moving. At that point I dropped all pretense of not being scared and bolted the rest of the way to my car, jumping in and locking the doors before pulling out a knife I carried in my glove compartment for self-defense. There were no other stores nearby, a few abandoned trailers, the post office was up the road and so tiny that it wouldn't be shelter anyways, even if a mail carrier was there. If they decided to come after me, I had nowhere and no one to run to, and the nearest town was over an hour away. I started the car up, backed up, and moved to pull out onto the highway, quietly freaking out. Because I was in a car that would likely not be able to outrun or outmaneuver them if they had decided to come after me. I paused at the entrance of the highway to see what they were doing and my heart sank. They'd also pulled up to the highway as if to get on it, but they were just sitting there, not moving, even though they could have pulled out before me and been well on their way, since they didn't have to back up and turn around first like I had. I'm not sure what would have happened next, but I spotted an 18-wheeler coming down the highway towards us going my direction. No sight has ever been more welcome than that beautiful shiny rig. The guys were so intent on watching me, I don't think they saw it in time to plan a counter-move to what I did next. I waited until it was close to them, but still with enough distance for me to get in front of the rig without causing him to slam on his brakes, and then I peeled out onto the highway. I looked back in the mirror and they were still sitting there, with the driver now flipping me the bird. But they didn't follow, quite possibly since they knew that there was now at least one other vehicle on the road who could come to my aid if needed. After that, I didn't let off the gas until I hit the next town. I called the state patrol for that area to file a report for suspicious activity, and they told me the gas station and store had been closed for a couple of months. They said they'd check it out, but I never heard back. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if I just kept going up to that door. If I had, I'd have been either in the store if the door was unlocked, or right at the door where they'd have easily been able to jump out, and block any escape, or chase me down before I could get into my car. It felt like I'd escaped a near ambush, and to this day I hate to think what might have happened if I'd been paying less attention. When I was about 7 years old, my father bought a few hundred acres in southern Mississippi about 1.5 hours west of Mobile, Alabama. He built a small cabin on top of a hill that was in the middle of a large field surrounded by woods. This house was about 5 miles from a paved road. To get to our land, it took nearly 10 minutes of driving down dirt roads from the main highway, which was south of the house. About a quarter mile north from the house, he built a small lake, or more like a pond. It was about as long as a football field, but wider. To get to the lake from the house, you could take Route A, which was a hard-packed dirt road that was lined with dogwood trees. It was beautiful in the spring. Route B was about 100 yards east of the dogwood lane, and we named it Vampire Trail because it was always so gloomy. The trees blocked out the sun on the brightest days, and it had a slight decline as you walked towards the lake. I say walked because this trail was not for vehicles. Thick woods filled the area outside and in between both trails. One morning during the fall, my parents and my little sister had gone to get ice cream and do some shopping. This trip would take them at least an hour or two. I was 10 years old, so I decided to go fishing while listening to Barmer play Ole Miss. The game was the usual Barmer win, so I thought I could ease the boredom of a blowout by fishing in the well-stocked lake. So, I carried my pole, small radio, and my small ice chest. I had an Airedale Terrier named Bully that never left my side, and it was on this day I realised how awesome he really was. Onto the lake we went. Picture a large oval, roughly the size of a football field, but larger, with an L-shaped pier on the southeast corner. Vampire Lane opened up to a more severe decline to the shore, and then a small pier. Across the lake on the west side, there was a narrow tree line that separated the shore from Dogwood Lane. The north side of the lake was the dam, and the south ended in thick and swampy woods. Fortunate for me, I realised later. About 5 minutes after I threw out my line, and 2 Barmer touchdowns later, I got that feeling. Bully must have felt it too, because a few seconds later I could hear him growling low and staring across the lake to the west, to the tree line that separated Dogwood Lane from the lake. I turned my head in that direction and almost immediately my eyes lit on what I thought to be a half silhouette of a large man behind a tree. It was too far to make out details, but close enough to be sure of what I was seeing. Almost 5 minutes went by, and right before I scolded myself for an overactive imagination, the half silhouette moved behind a tree slowly. Bully stood and growled louder, and I told him quietly to stop, and I turned my head north towards the dam, while keeping my eyes and attention rooted to that tree. Over the next 10 minutes, which felt like hours, I watched, while this figure moved slowly from tree to tree, always north and always facing me. The saying "scared stiff" was something I found to be true. For some reason, I thought it important that whoever it was did not know I was aware. I finally realised that the figure's path was bringing them closer to the dam, which would make their path to me shorter and easier. My paralysis broke, and I casually put down the fishing pole and started walking towards Vampire Lane. As an adult, I was in the army for 11 years as an MP, but not turning to look over my shoulder during that walk was the hardest thing I've ever done. In my mind's eye, whoever it was screaming across the dam towards me. When I hit the tree line, I broke into a run. As I was running, Bully dashed ahead of me, and my anger turned into admiration as he stopped just some 20 yards ahead and faced north until I passed him. He continued this action the entire run home. My dog was watching my back. Although I can grasp the awesomeness of this now, at the time I was so scared that I was literally sick. Even at such a young age, I knew that a large man watching and trying to creep up on a 10-year-old boy was up to no good. When I reached the cabin, I immediately locked the door and got one of my dad's shotguns as well as his .38 revolver. I sat at the large front window, my eyes glued to both trail openings and the woods between them. My family returned shortly after, and for some reason I did not mention what happened. I never felt safe there again. When me and my friends and my little sister wanted to go anywhere other than the area around the cabin, I made sure my parents were with us. What scares me the most, though, is the fact that our closest neighbours were about 2 miles northwest of us, with thick woods in between as the crow flies. Who the hell was watching me from the woods that day? Guess I may never know. I sometimes wish I could go back then, as a grown man with military training, as I am now. Bully lived a full life and was put to sleep peacefully as a very old but great dog, the best dog I've ever known.